While the world pressures nations to pick sides between the West and Russia, one country has mastered the art of having it both ways. India has increased its Russian oil imports by 50 times since the Ukraine war began, while simultaneously deepening military cooperation with the United States. How is India pulling off this seemingly impossible balancing act, and what does it mean for the future of global power? Today we're diving into one of the most sophisticated diplomatic strategies in modern geopolitics, India's approach to great power competition. With 1.4 billion people and the world's fifth largest economy, India's choices matter enormously for global stability. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how India maintains strategic partnerships with rivals, why this approach works, and whether it's sustainable long-term. To understand India's current strategy, we need to go back to 1947. When India gained independence, the world was rapidly dividing into American and Soviet spheres of influence. Most newly independent nations felt pressure to choose sides, but India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, pioneered a different approach: non-alignment. This wasn't neutrality in the Swiss sense, staying out of global affairs entirely. Non-alignment meant actively engaging with both superpowers while refusing to formally ally with either. India would judge each issue on its merits rather than automatically supporting one bloc or the other. The strategy served India well during the Cold War. When Pakistan aligned with the United States and China, India naturally tilted toward the Soviet Union without becoming a formal ally. The USSR provided crucial military technology, including nuclear assistance, fighter aircraft, and naval vessels. Soviet support proved invaluable during India's wars with Pakistan and China. But non-alignment also created dependencies. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union supplied about 70% of India's military equipment. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, India faced a strategic crisis. Its primary partner had disappeared, and the unipolar American moment seemed to demand choosing sides. India's response was to gradually pivot toward the West while maintaining its Russian relationship. The 1991 economic liberalization opened India to American investment and technology. Yet India never abandoned its Soviet-era partnerships, creating the foundation for today's balancing act. Now, when people discuss India's Russia relationship, they often focus on recent oil purchases. Since February 2022, India has indeed become Russia's second-largest oil customer, buying discounted crude while Western sanctions limit Moscow's market access. But energy is just the tip of the iceberg. The defense relationship runs much deeper. Russia remains India's largest arms supplier, providing everything from S-400 missile defense systems to nuclear submarines. The recent delivery of S-400 systems to India proceeded despite American threats of sanctions under the CAATSA, countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. This defense cooperation isn't just about buying weapons. It includes technology transfer and joint development. Russia has shared sensitive technologies with India that Western nations often refuse to provide. The BrahMos cruise missile, jointly developed by India and Russia, represents one of the world's most advanced supersonic missiles. Space cooperation adds another dimension. Russia helped launch numerous Indian satellites and provided technology for India's space program. Nuclear cooperation continues through Russian assistance with India's civilian nuclear program, including the construction of multiple reactors. Perhaps most importantly, Russia has never imposed conditions on its relationship with India. Unlike Western partners who often attach strings related to democracy, human rights, or specific policy positions, Russia engages with India purely on transactional terms. This appeals to Indian policymakers who value sovereignty and resist external pressure. While maintaining Russian ties, India has simultaneously deepened its engagement with the West, particularly the United States. The transformation has been remarkable, from Cold War estrangement to strategic partnership in just 3 decades. The Quad partnership, linking India with the US, Japan, and Australia, represents India's most significant multilateral security commitment since independence. Originally conceived as a democratic alliance to counter China's rise, the Quad conducts joint military exercises, coordinates on technology issues, and increasingly aligns their Indo-Pacific strategies. Defense cooperation with America has expanded dramatically. India now conducts more military exercises with the US than with any other nation. The two countries share intelligence, coordinate on maritime security, and increasingly integrate their defense technologies. American companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin now compete for major Indian defense contracts alongside traditional Russian suppliers. Technology partnerships have become crucial. The US-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, ICET, focuses on semiconductors, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and space technology. These partnerships matter enormously for India's long-term economic development and technological sovereignty. Before we dive into the China factor that drives much of this strategy, I want to hear your perspective. Do you think India's balancing act between Russia and the West is sustainable, or will it eventually be forced to choose sides? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this deep dive into modern geopolitics. Nothing explains India's foreign policy quite like its relationship with China. Despite both being rising Asian powers, India and China have become strategic rivals, and this rivalry shapes how India approaches both Russia and the West. The 4,057-kilometer border between India and China remains disputed, leading to regular military standoffs. The most serious recent incident occurred in Galwan Valley in 2020, where Chinese and Indian soldiers fought hand-to-hand combat for the first time in 45 years, resulting in casualties on both sides. But border disputes are just one dimension of the rivalry. China's Belt and Road Initiative encircles India with Chinese-funded infrastructure projects in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, part of BRI, runs through territory that India claims as its own. China's support for Pakistan complicates India's security calculations. Beijing provides advanced military technology to Islamabad and supports Pakistan's positions in international forums. This creates a two-front challenge for Indian strategic planners. The economic dimension matters too. China is simultaneously India's largest trading partner and its greatest economic competitor. While bilateral trade exceeds $125 billion annually, India runs a massive trade deficit with China and worries about technological dependence on its rival. This China challenge explains why India can maintain partnerships with both Russia and America simultaneously. Russia shares India's concerns about Chinese dominance and has its own territorial disputes with Beijing. Meanwhile, the US sees India as a crucial partner in containing Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. India's approach to the Ukraine war perfectly illustrates its balancing strategy. While most of the world either condemned or supported Russia's actions, India chose a different path: principled neutrality combined with practical opportunism. At the UN Security Council, India abstained on resolutions condemning Russian actions, refusing to directly criticize Moscow while also not endorsing the invasion. Indian officials consistently called for dialogue and diplomacy while avoiding taking sides on the conflict's fundamental questions. Simultaneously, India dramatically increased economic ties with Russia. Russian oil imports skyrocketed from virtually nothing to over 2 million barrels per day, making Russia India's largest oil supplier. This wasn't just opportunism. Discounted Russian oil saved India billions of dollars while helping manage domestic inflation. But India also deepened its Western partnerships during this same period. The country participated in Quad summits, expanded defense cooperation with the US, and coordinated with European partners on various regional issues. India managed to increase engagement with both sides simultaneously. This strategy works because both Russia and the West need India more than India needs either of them exclusively. Russia needs India as a major non-Western partner and market for its energy exports. The West needs India as a counterweight to China and as a massive market for technology and defense partnerships. India's balancing act reflects a broader vision of how global power should be organized. Unlike during the Cold War, when the world was essentially bipolar, Indian leaders believe we're entering a truly multipolar era where multiple centers of power will coexist. In this vision, India doesn't need to choose between America and China, or between the West and Russia. Instead, India can maintain partnerships with multiple powers while preserving its own strategic autonomy. This approach appeals to many countries in the Global South who want to avoid great power competition. India's participation in multiple multilateral forums reflects this strategy. New Delhi is simultaneously a member of the Quad, with US, Japan, Australia, BRICS, with China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, dominated by China and Russia. Rather than seeing these as contradictory commitments, India views them as complementary platforms for different types of cooperation. The country has also emerged as a leader of the Global South, representing developing nations' interests in forums like the G20. India's G20 presidency in 2023 focused on issues like sustainable development, food security, and energy transition, themes that resonate with developing countries regardless of their positions on great power competition. India's balancing act isn't just strategic, it's deeply economic. As the world's most populous country with enormous development needs, India requires access to technology, investment, and markets from multiple sources. Russian energy partnerships provide crucial price advantages. During periods of high global oil prices, discounted Russian crude saves India billions of dollars that can be redirected toward domestic development. Russian fertilizer imports also help support India's agricultural sector. Meanwhile, Western partnerships offer access to advanced technology and massive investment opportunities. American tech giants like Google, Microsoft, and Apple have made India a major hub for both operations and research. The US-India trade relationship exceeds $190 billion annually and continues growing. European partnerships add another dimension, particularly in renewable energy and manufacturing. Germany's engineering expertise, France's nuclear technology, and UK's financial services all play important roles in India's development strategy. This economic diversification protects India from overdependence on any single partner. Unlike countries that rely heavily on one major power, India has created multiple economic relationships that would be costly for any partner to sever. However, India's balancing act faces increasing pressure. As great power competition intensifies, both sides are demanding greater clarity about India's ultimate loyalties. American officials privately express frustration with India's Russia relationship, while Moscow worries about India's growing Western ties. technology competition creates particular challenges. India wants access to both American semiconductors and Russian defense technology, but export controls and sanctions make this increasingly difficult. The S-400 missile system purchase already triggered American sanctions threats, and future technology transfers may face similar obstacles. Climate change and energy transition add complexity. While India benefits from cheap Russian oil today, long-term sustainability requires transitioning to renewable energy, an area where Western technology and investment are crucial. Balancing short-term energy security with long-term climate commitments requires careful navigation. India's strategic autonomy represents a sophisticated response to multipolar competition, but it's not without risks. Success requires exceptional diplomatic skill, favorable global conditions, and continued economic growth that makes India valuable to all partners. As global tensions escalate, India's balancing act will face its greatest test. Can New Delhi maintain partnerships with rivals indefinitely, or will it eventually be forced to choose sides? The answer will help determine whether we're truly entering a multipolar world or heading toward a new bipolar confrontation. What do you think? Is India's approach a model for other middle powers, or an unsustainable strategy that will eventually collapse? How do you see this balancing act playing out over the next decade? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this analysis of modern geopolitics fascinating, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into how great power competition is reshaping our world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.